Tea, one of the Chinese people's favorite drinks, is also an important part of Chinese culture. Chinese tea culture has a long history and extensive influence. It not only reflects the Chinese people's living habits, aesthetic tastes, moral concepts and spiritual pursuits, but also spreads and communicates to all parts of the world through various channels and methods, promoting Chinese and foreign cultures, communication and integration. China is the hometown of tea, and the origin of tea culture can be traced back to ancient times. According to historical records, the origin of tea can be traced back to 2737 BC, when Shenang in ancient China discovered the tea tree and tried to boil its leaves for drinking. Since then, tea has gradually spread to all parts of the country and has become a traditional drink in China. In the pre-Qin period, tea was mainly used for medicinal or sacrificial purposes. But the way of drinking tea at that time was completely different from that of now, mainly cooking tea. 3 or 5 friends cook tea around the stove, put fresh tea leaves into boiling water, or use grinded dry tea leaves into powder, and add salt, brown sugar, cinnamon, ginger, pepper, or other condiments, according to personal preference. After cooking, scoop out the tea with a long spoon and share it. During the Han Dynasty, tea became popular as a beverage. In 59 BC, Wang Bao of the Western Han Dynasty wrote Tong Yue when he was buying slaves. There are words such as cooking tea with all utensils and Wu Yang buys tea. This is the earliest record of the tea trade. Food theory written by Hu Tuo, a genius doctor of the Eastern Han Dynasty, has descriptions such as eat bitter tea for a long time to benefit thinking. All these show that people in the Han Dynasty already knew to use tea to boil water for drinking, and had some knowledge of its taste and properties. During the Wei and Jin dynasties, tea started as a kind of enjoyment and entertainment. The celebrities and dignitaries at that time liked to drink tea as a kind of social activity. The Sui dynasty initiated the tribute tea system, where local officials organized private tea planting and tea making, and paid tribute to the royal family and nobles. In the Tang dynasty, many famous new tea varieties appeared, such as Zhisun, Yangxian, Longtuan, and so on. The Tang dynasty also gave birth to a heavyweight figure in Chinese tea culture, Lu U, who was called the tea saint by later generations. The tea classic written by him was the first book in China devoted to tea. It systematically introduces the knowledge of tea planting, picking, brewing, and tasting at that time, and puts forward the evaluation criteria of color, aroma, taste, and utensils. The Song dynasty was a dynasty in which Chinese culture developed rapidly, with countless poems, words, songs, and fu, and tea culture also entered a new stage of development.
The Song dynasty followed the tribute tea system of the Tang dynasty. The local government paid tribute tea to the emperor, and the officials in charge made the tribute tea into tea balls, and printed patterns of dragons and phoenixes on molds, which were called dragon and phoenix tea balls. When drinking tuancha, the tea leaves need to be crushed. People at that time no longer brewed tea. They preferred
点茶.
The process begins with hot water being poured over fine powdered tea, creating a paste. Then more hot water is slowly added as the tea is constantly whisked by hand with a bamboo stick. This action of pouring hot water is called
点.
Hence the name
点茶.
In Su Shi's poems, there is a description of the beaded roof is ground and the fine beads fall, and the dizzy turns around and the snow is light, and I dare not entrust the ground tea to the servants. I watch the snow water produce pearls of jade. In the Song dynasty,
斗茶,
that is, to evaluate the quality of tea and tea art,
茶百戏,
also known as fincha, shuadanqing, soup opera, chashi, etc. An ancient tea ceremony that can make the veins of tea soup form images. Not only can make the tea soup form rich foam but also form characters and patterns in the tea soup, similar to today's cappuccino coffee latte art. These activities have further improved the artistry and entertainment of tea, also make tea fighting activities more prosperous. from high-ranking officials and dignitaries to the ordinary people. The great poet Lu Yu's, "On a low paper I slant my idle calligraphy. By the sunny window I frolic with fine milk and tea," talks about the tea event in Chabaishi. Emperor Zhao Ji of the Song dynasty also personally wrote a book, Grand View Tea Theory, which specifically discussed the methods and etiquette of drinking tea. It introduces in detail the skills and norms of making tea,
点茶
and appreciating tea at that time. It puts forward the tea-tasting spirit of harmony, respect, purity, and silence. During the Ming and Qing dynasties, tea had a new development. The most important change in tea culture in the Ming dynasty was the popularization of loose tea, which replaced the compressed tea cakes that were dominant in the previous dynasties. Loose tea was easier to prepare and consume, as it did not require grinding or whisking. It also allowed more flexibility and diversity in brewing and tasting different kinds of tea. Loose tea promoted the simplification of tea drinking, as it reduced the number of utensils and steps involved. The basic utensils for loose tea drinking were a teapot, a teacup, and a kettle. The basic steps for loose tea drinking were boiling water, adding tea leaves to the teapot, pouring water over the tea leaves, steeping for a few minutes, and serving the tea to the teacup. And the other side, the most significant change in tea culture in the Ming dynasty was the introduction of new varieties of tea, such as black tea, red tea, flower tea, and oolong tea. These varieties were developed by different regions and methods of cultivation, processing, and brewing. For example, black tea was first produced in Fujian province by fermenting and drying the tea leaves, which gave them a dark color and a strong flavor. Red tea also originated in Fujian province by fully oxidizing the tea leaves, which gave them a reddish color and a mellow taste. Flower tea was made by adding flowers such as jasmine, osmanthus, or rosé to green or white tea, which gave them a fragrant aroma and a delicate taste. Oolong tea was also a specialty of Fujian province, which was made by partially oxidizing and rolling the tea leaves, which gave them a complex flavor and a golden color. Despite the simplification of tea drinking in the Ming dynasty, there was still a great appreciation and pursuit of the beauty of tea utensils. Tea utensils were not only functional tools but also artistic expressions and cultural symbols. Tea utensils reflected the aesthetic preferences, social status, and personal style of tea drinkers. There were many types and styles of tea utensils in the Ming dynasty, such as porcelain, pottery, lacquerware, jade, metal, bamboo, wood, etc. Among them, porcelain was especially favored for its fine texture, smooth surface, elegant shape, and colorful glaze. Some of the famous porcelain wares for tea drinking in the Ming dynasty were blue and white porcelain from Jingdezhen Kiln, Celadon porcelain from Longchen Kiln, white porcelain from Dehua Kiln, etc. As the Ming dynasty was replaced by the Qing dynasty, new tea-making techniques were constantly introduced. In the early Qing dynasty, due to the new ruling class's love for Zhejiang green tea, the rock tea in Wuyishan, Fujian gradually turned from prosperity to decline. But the industrious and intelligent Wuyi mountain people were not willing to let others down. They took the initiative to invite tea monks from other places to change the original tea-making method of steaming tea handed down from their ancestors to the method of frying tea. The fresh tea leaves are fermented to different degrees during the drying process to obtain the unique black tea and oolong tea of Wuyi Mountain, such as Lopsong Sushong and Dahongpao. These new tea-making techniques not only spread in Fujian province, but also spread to Guangdong, Taiwan and other places, producing many famous Chinese teas such as Fengwang Danking and Dongding Oolong, which made a great contribution to the development of Chinese tea culture. In 1610, the Dutch East India Company collected a small amount of samples of Chinese tea through Xiamen, China, and packaged it as a herbal medicine that could cure all diseases for sale, and the sales volume continued to rise. Tea also spread to Germany, France and the American continent. In 1662, When Princess Catherine of Portugal married King Charles II of England, a box of Chinese tea and a set of exquisite Chinese tea sets were included in the dowry. Princess Catherine often entertained new friends with tea, so the custom of drinking Chinese tea gradually swept the entire European aristocratic world. At the end of the 17th century, a tea with a black color but more fragrant aroma, once it appeared, overshadowed the limelight of green tea and was favored by European nobles. Rock tea. These wuyi tea leaves can not only stimulate the active substances in the tea leaves more fully during the oxidation and fermentation process, making the fragrance more intense, but also make the tea leaves more suitable for long-distance transportation and more resistant to foaming. In the Boston Tea Party event that later became the fuse of the American Revolutionary War, 80% of the 342 boxes of tea that were poured into the sea were wuyi rock tea. Tea houses prospered in the Qing dynasty and became gathering places for intellectuals, artists, and businessmen. These venues are centers of intellectual discussion, information exchange, artistic performances, and more. Tea artisans who are good at making and serving tea become respected figures in society. They elevated tea drinking to an art, emphasizing the beauty of tea sets, tea leaves, and the harmonious interaction between host and guest. The development of tea culture in the Qing dynasty had a profound impact on literature and art. Many poems, essays, and paintings are about tea, capturing its essence and symbolism. Literati often depict scenes of drinking tea in their works as a metaphor for seeking knowledge, introspection, and appreciation of nature. Tea-related subjects such as tea sets, tea gardens, and tea ceremonies became popular subjects for artists, contributing to the rich artistic heritage of that era. It can be seen from the above historical materials and textual research that the origin of Chinese tea culture has a profound historical background and rich cultural connotations. Chinese tea culture has experienced a long and wonderful development process from medicinal use to drinking, from enjoyment to entertainment, from etiquette to art. Chinese tea culture not only reflects the living habits, aesthetic tastes, moral concepts, and spiritual pursuits of the Chinese people but also gives birth to many excellent tea cultural heritages such as tea masters, tea books, tea poems, tea paintings, and tea utensils. Chinese tea culture is the treasure of the Chinese nation and the wealth of world culture.